Welcome back, everyone. Michael here with Offshore Citizen. Today we're going to discuss the subject of what a U.S. citizenship costs. So there's a lot of people who are increasingly contacting me interested in renouncing their U.S. citizenship. There's a general sentiment among a bunch of people that a U.S. citizenship is more a liability than an asset today. And, so this is a big impetus to get a second citizenship, renounce, etc. So I'm going to talk to you about, does this make sense for you? Basically, does it make sense for you to renounce? What is the cost of a U.S. citizenship? And, let's weigh it against the benefits, because there's some counter arguments about, the things that you get with a U.S. citizenship. So before we do that, if you haven't already, please smash the subscribe button, nail the notification bell. Really appreciate your subscription, working hard to grow the channel. We aim to produce great content for you every single day, so you can go through and, check that out. If you have any questions, you'd like assistance with where to move, how to set yourself up internationally, on the strategy side or on the implementation side, getting citizenships, getting residencies, setting up offshore companies, bank accounts, trusts, asset protection, the international tax planning, please reach out to me. You can book a call, calendly.com/Michael Rosmer. There's a link in the description below. Or you can check out our websites, offshorecitizen.net, offshorecapitalist.com, and you can send us a message through there. Okay, so I've had more people than ever contacting me about an interest in renouncing their U.S. citizenship. And to be fair, this is a very serious decision, right? This is something that I don't think should be done blasé. I don't think should be done without careful consideration, etc. I don't think you should be in a position where, there's some people who are very against the West and, the West is going down and things like this. I don't think it's nearly so clear, right? If we look at the situation with U.S. citizenship, there are a bunch of pros and a bunch of cons. So first of all, as a travel document, it is a very powerful travel document, okay? It's certainly not the top citizenship in the world. Certainly, I don't know, it's probably top 10 or so. So it's fairly strong, but it's far from, the best, right? So there are definitely options you could get which would be better. Now, some people will argue with me. They'll say, hey, listen, what about the protections that your country will afford you when you're abroad? And it's funny, I was having a conversation with some people at one of the companies I do business with here in Dubai the other day, and we were having specifically this conversation because one of the people was an American, the other two people were not, and I was saying, but I don't want to give up my U.S. citizenship because of this. And by the way, it's perfectly fair if a person doesn't want, I think lots of people probably should keep their U.S. citizenship. That being said, it was interesting because he had been in a situation where he was in trouble, and you know how much help he got from the U.S.? Zero. So I think there's certain cases where, certainly the U.S. has a long arm. They have, a lot of capability compared to a lot of countries. But on the flip side, I just heard about a case in the last month or so where some girls were in Mexico, I think it was, Mexico, Jamaica, something like that. I think it was Mexico. And they ended up in an abusive situation. They were, practically being held hostage, things like this. And the Serbian embassy helped to get them out. And so you're like, okay, Serbia is helping those people. Is there really that much of a major advantage of a U.S. citizenship over some other? I think it's more of a mental idea than a reality, okay? On the flip side, let's compare with some other things. So does the U.S. give you free public health care? Nope. Does the U.S. provide, great educational benefits for if your kids, et cetera, are there? No. Does the U.S. provide you kind of a great social safety net? No. So, you can start running down and you can start saying, okay, well, what are you getting out of this? Certainly you're getting visa-free access, and certainly you're getting the access to live in the U.S. and take advantage of what opportunities exist there. And historically, that was really valuable, right? Let's be honest. From a historic standpoint, the U.S. was a great place to live, right? Comparatively to a lot of the world. And you were in a situation where not only was it a great place to live, but that was, very really, a place with far more opportunities. To this day, I talk to different people who contact me looking for help, and maybe they work for Microsoft in Seattle, and the wages are just that much higher if you live in Seattle versus you live in Singapore. And Singapore is a very developed place, right? So definitely for certain industries, there are just more opportunities there. If you're looking for access to capital, Silicon Valley by far has the most robust capital markets for investing going. If you're looking at the markets in New York, et cetera, okay, China's rising up, Singapore's pretty good, London is pretty good. There's a few places that have pretty strong ecosystems, but still not on the same caliber. That being said, the ability to take advantage of a lot of those opportunities, especially if you're an entrepreneur, less if you're an employee, but more if you're an entrepreneur, is increasingly location independent. So at this point in time, for a lot of people, what difference does it make? Okay, maybe if you're in the film industry, you need to be in California, right? Maybe if you're in certain industries, there's certain places you just need to be, right? Maybe you're doing oil field work in North Dakota. All right, that is what it is. But by and large, there's an increasing shift where you can get the same opportunities remotely that you can domestically. So then what's the point? So this brings us to the cost, right? Because, for instance, I've talked about, if you were to get an equivalent passport, arguably maybe even a better passport than the US passport would say would be the Hungarian or the Maltese passports, right? These are expensive, right? 750,000 euros for Hungary. That program's actually closing. But anyway, that's the case what it is. And Malta, you're talking about 900,000 plus basically by the time you're into it. This is expensive. So you might say, well, is it worth putting out that money? Well, I think the flip side is, let's look at the cost, right? So if you're living in the US, and heck, not if you're living in the US, if you're a US citizen, okay, they're going to tax you on your worldwide income for your entire life. And they're getting more and more aggressive about not allowing you to defer that income abroad. There's a talk from Biden that guilty tax, which affects your foreign companies, is going to go from 10.5% up to 21%. I mean, let's just imagine that your business, you could in one scenario, let's say that you go and you have a Hungarian citizenship and you can operate through a UAE company and you can pay no tax, right? Versus as an American, you're going to pay, in a best case scenario, 10.5% corporate tax and then plus whatever on the personal side. Let's call it 30%, right? Well, if you're making $1 million a year, for easy numbers, before we talk about raising capital gains rates and all these other things that they're doing, you're talking about 300 grand a year, right? So how many years are you going to make that much money for? How much you're going to make over the next 10 years? Are you going to make $10 million? Are you going to, over 20 years, are you going to make $10 million? Over 30 years, So all of a sudden you're like, okay, well, over 30 years, I'm talking about paying millions in tax, millions and millions in tax. So that doesn't sound good. For my kids, okay, say you have kids, now you have to send your kids to school. Well, if you're an EU citizen and you can send them to school in Germany, virtually free, versus, I'm talking about post-secondary education here, not even just normal education, versus if I'm going to send them to school in the US, I mean, you could be spending 70 grand a year or something on university, depending on where they're going. So, what's the equivalency here? Then you talk about healthcare, right? So it's true that you can get access to very good quality healthcare with the right doctors, the right hospitals, et cetera, in the US. On the other hand, they don't have a monopoly on that by any stretch. The quality of healthcare, if you look at the health outcomes in the US, are worse than a lot of these other countries. The difference is, in those places, you'll get free healthcare or close to it, certainly very cheap. You can just to see, here's like a simple example. This is an exercise for you to do. Go online or go and get some quotes for travel insurance, okay? So global, like, hey, listen, I'm a digital nomad. I'm going to be all over the world. I want international travel insurance, international health insurance, right? If I want that coverage for everywhere in the world versus if I want it including the US, and look at how much higher the prices are. Crazy, right? So this is a differential. It's just not a good situation to be in. So very, very interesting to look at that. In addition to that, there's of course, what do you find about the culture and, is it favorable to run your business there and so on and so forth. On top of that, what about the cost of the ongoing regulations and filing requirements, et cetera? So if I have to file HBAR reports, if I have to worry about transfer pricing studies, if I have to worry about, all of these different things that allow me to operate my business just normally, right? Whereas if I'm a resident of Singapore, if I'm a resident of UAE, if I'm a resident of one of these other countries, I have none of that, right? So the ongoing costs every year, again, in any given year, this might not add up to much, right? Maybe you're like, okay, so it costs me a few $1,000s a year in extra filing. I have some liability where I could mess it up. Maybe I'm going to get audited every 10 years or something on average, whatever the numbers happen to be. It's not that much, but over 30 years, that's a lot. And do you want that? So anyway, Not to say that, a person shouldn't take it. I think, again, there are cases where the opportunities are worth it, where the visa-free access is worth it, etc. And, it is an asset that you've got. If somebody's making, 100 grand a year, or they're working at Microsoft and, they have a great opportunity, etc., probably doesn't make a lot of sense to give up your US citizenship. But if you're an entrepreneur, somebody who is, building a business that's making high 6, low 7, or into the 8 figures, like, the cost of that citizenship is probably an order of magnitude higher than what you could just pay to get a better citizenship somewhere else. So anyway, keep that in mind. If you have any help, if you would like any help with this, please reach out to me. You can book a call. Like I said, the Hungarian program is closing, so if a person is interested in that, they should do that right away. We start the process. Otherwise, there's Malta, although more expensive, more of a pain in the ass, things like this. Anyway. And I'm going to look forward to seeing you guys on the next video. If you like kind of the content that we have here, please go and check out my other channel, Solutions Podcast. It's on YouTube as well. We're trying to build that. And I'm going to look forward to seeing you guys on the next video.